talking about this though.
Yeah.
Looks really good today.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
You just get that trimmed up today?
The beard got trimmed yesterday. It was time I needed this summer cut. So we trimmed it down, sharpened her up a little bit, getting ready to go on a 3, almost 4-day kind of excursion. Gonna be spending some time out on the East Coast again. The Atlanta Range Day. Bunch of the crew is going to be out there, and so many other people I'm super excited about. So I'm like, I need to clean this up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shoot a couple podcasts.
Nice.
Thanks.
Look good, popping.
Yeah, when you take that off, you take a little bit more of the gray off. You know, for a while there, I went through so many like barbers because I was like, I need all the gray out of here, and they couldn't do it, so I fired them and moved on to the next barber.
That was poor guy.
Much like people run through personal trainers. Oh, I didn't lose the 10 pounds with that trainer, so I'm moving on to the next one because that one sucks. Somebody else's fault. So thanks, I appreciate it. Speaking of gray hair.
That gray hat with the gray hair, though, accentuates it just a bit.
But it
And
matches my shoes.
And the black, I mean, it's just popping.
I mean, the whole fit today.
Yeah.
I mean,
black and gray.
Anyway, the whole gray hair thing is interesting. I've had several conversations with people over the last couple of weeks as I've spent some more time with them. Or when I say more time, I just mean like I've been in these groups for a couple of days on end for training seminars or sessions or whatever, courses, and conversations come up about working out. I tend to be the older guy in the group almost every time. There's always maybe one or two in there, but I tend to be like the older guy participating in the group. A lot of times now, that's where I kind of find myself. It is interesting. It sometimes feels a little weird. At the same time, like I don't feel like the older guy. Like, which I have to ask questions about that sometimes to myself. Sometimes I just go like, I don't know, am I not mature enough? Like, shouldn't I feel like, I don't know. What are you supposed to feel like at 48 years old? I don't know. But it's a question I think people ask themselves, like, am I supposed to feel this way? I'm the opposite. I'm like, what am I supposed to feel like? Like, that's kind of the question that comes up. And then I'm only bringing this up because there's been a lot of fitness questions lately. And a lot of these guys that I'm training with, some of this stuff has been a little bit more advanced, or they're taking a little bit more advanced courses, and these guys are starting to age, right? It's not a group full of, when I say I'm the older guy, it's not a group full of 28-year-olds and I'm 48. It's guys that are in their 40s. And then I would say that's kind of the average. And then like the either end of that spectrum or close to it. This is mid-30s to, close to 40. They're like hitting that 40 mark. And, we're talking about fitness and they're asking me, questions or whatever. And they're still very much in the young man's mindset in my mind with regard to how they're approaching their fitness. And a lot of that is based on history and other things. But I want to talk about the day like fitness at 40. Because when you get north of 40, you're going to feel some things.
Yeah, things change.
Things do change. That's inevitable. I wanted to kind of get into that with you guys today. Cece, I mean, you're sitting here at
nipping at your heels.
Nipping at my heels. I mean, so.
But I am still younger.
From the female perspective, I mean, things change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have to say, sitting here at 47, I think I really started to notice things changing probably around 42. Just as far as how my body's feeling, resiliency, recovery, soreness, fatigue, the drive, motivation. Exercise has been a habit for several decades. And, when you wake up one morning and you think about, oh, my body's aching and maybe I should sleep this morning and rest a little bit more. I don't really feel like working out today. Then something is up.
Yeah, we just talked about a few of those things like on the previous podcast that we had. But one of the big things for me is, again, it's not about like do I feel my age? I don't even know what the hell that means. But what I do know as I got older, and it started like 38 to 40, my fitness was really good, but my health wasn't. Interestingly, like I had to really turn that around. That took me some time, but my fitness was awesome. And it was because I was just pushing. But the downstream effects of doing that without balancing out the rest of the things that were going on in my life, I became unhealthy in a few different ways, from a psychological perspective, emotional perspective, and then right on down to hard blood marker perspective. It was like, oh shit, it was a real wake up call for me there. I've talked about that stuff on the show before, but it wasn't, it's not my age that feels different. It's not like, oh God, here's another year and I feel this. It very specifically was the recovery piece. Like I just don't recover the same way, as I did from anything, whether that's not getting enough sleep or a stressful situation or a long night out or a hard workout or whatever else. I definitely started to see some things change there. Jeff, you're like kind of halfway through your 30s now. Would you say you were like 35?
Yeah, 35.
What's changed for you, say, in the last 5 years? I know from 30 to 35, there were major changes for me. But they were, when I say major, I didn't realize those until about 5 years after that, till I hit about 40. And I was like, man, I should have seen this coming. Or I wasn't really paying attention or whatever. I wonder how things are going for you.
Well, so for me, when around 30, 28, I got heavily into mobility. So I was doing that a lot. And what I noticed recently is I took like 6 or 8 months off when my dad was sick, helping him out. I wasn't on my game. And I lost mobility, tissue quality changed. And I felt like shit. Like I can't sit up all the way in some postures where like you do a Z press where you're doing a seated overhead press with the barbell with your legs out in front of you. I can't sit up with a neutral spine anymore right now. So I'm working on things and I'm noticing getting back to where I was is taking longer. And like you're talking about the recovery and like the way these tissues, when we talk about casting, they do not want to reverse.
Right.
So it's taken me a very long time to actually gain just a little bit in this mobility game. So that's what I've noticed as I've aged.
Yeah, so I think what you're kind of speaking to more is or more specifically, maybe like the resiliency piece, like your ability to recapture what you had previously, whether that's strength and whether that's, cardiovascular fitness or whatever else. Yeah, I started to recognize that too. And like very recently, like my overhead stuff is really like, I have to be really careful, like going overhead with my shoulders and stuff. In the past, I would kind of power through things. All right, I know I need to address this a little bit more, maybe as you mentioned, like through the mobility, flexibility thing, and I could kind of get through it. And there were things along the way, like I have 2 torn labrums, both shoulders are kind of messy, but I could still do stuff now, like I just, even with putting in the time, I feel like I need to put in more time because the resiliency is like, I'm never really back to baseline or threshold. I feel like it's kind of getting away from me, which is not fun to think about, but it's also a reality
for sure.
for a lot of reasons. I think as I've gotten older and I think back, like here's the things that were going through my head as a younger guy, and I have a little bit of it, maybe of a different perspective than a lot of people that are pushing now into their age and they're trying to push their health and fitness, because I was working in the industry and I was working with a lot of different people. And a lot of those people were 40 plus people. I liked to have, for a long time, I liked to think, and even back then, I thought that I could relate to them. Yeah, I get it. I mean, things change and, hormones change and, activity change. You have different stressors in life. We can talk about that. But, I like to think that, but you never really can come to grips with that until you're in that situation. But going back, the things that were in my head back then were, at 25, 28, whatever years old, in my 20s, let's just put it that way. I was looking at the other 40-year-old somethings in the gym and making kind of judgment calls like, that dude's really keeping it together. Like he's really kept it together for a long time. Or that lady, she's well into her 40s, maybe in her 50s, and she's killing it. Like that's awesome. And then I'd look at the other part of that spectrum, which would be, holy shit, I cannot look like that or perform like that when I'm that age. I will do anything. I'll never look like that. Right. Like, and that was almost, I want to say it was a motivation, but that was my mindset. Like at that time, not understanding fully, the years that would pass and the things that would happen. But I think that's a common thing for a lot of younger people to look at and go, yeah, dude, just don't get old and fat, like get old, but don't get fat, and keep your fitness and don't eat like an asshole. And those are all very easy things to say, but there's things that come along in life that even if you're giving it a college try, when we're talking about resiliency and recovery and things, like it gets harder and harder to do. But going back to who I was comparing to, I can tell you what strikes me now that I may not have been really paying attention to then. because again, this was very surface level for me. Like, who knows what their cardiovascular health looked like or whatever. I'm just looking from externally, like from outside looking in.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, they were well muscled. These people lifted weights, and a lot of weights. Like, that was their main thing. That's how they stayed in. To me, that's how they stayed in front. The more muscle they had, the more they could do out there on the floor. And so there were some guys in there that were really well developed, into their older ages. Again, I'm saying that at, into their 40s. It's not uber old, but it was much older than me, and they looked great, right? And they performed really well, and they seemed to have good energy about it. Everything right on, like, down to their skin, their hair, like, they just looked more well put together, and they performed well. That was the thing that struck me. Another thing that struck me about that is the older people that were like runners, that did like running and cycling, who I trained with a little bit because I was doing some of that stuff back then. Like, they were always fucking hurting. They were always like, they didn't have a lot of muscle. I would
Skin's
just
kind of saggy.
Yeah.
All that oxidative.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I used to credit it to the sun. Oh, they spend so much time out in the sun running and riding and swimming and whatever else. But look, some of these older dudes, they spent plenty of time as sun gods, out there tanning and whatever else. And I'm like, there's something different here, about these two. And I wasn't really putting it together, but again, like that oxidative stress. But the people that weren't well muscled, when I was looking at them as a younger guy, going, they look old. They look frail. They look frail. It looks like if they fell down, they'd stay down.
Yeah.
Versus even a guy that was well muscled, maybe carrying around a little higher body fat percentage. I was like, that dude looks like he could
sturdy.
He could take a licking and keep on ticking, kind of thing. And last thing I'll say with this was my comparison was my old man, who started lifting weights in his late 20s and into his early 30s. He was like a gymnast before, I would say. He was in the service, so he was really fit then. But he really started lifting weights, and he got pretty. He went from like 170 pounds to 225 pounds in a fairly short period of time. He got into the weights. And so he was actually a little bit older than most of my friends' dads. I can remember that as well. And I remember looking at them, and to me, when I was very young, like a kid, I wasn't making the connection. It was just my dad. My friends would come over, we'd open the door, they'd come in the door, dad being there in a tank top, and they'd go, dude, your dad is jacked. I'd be like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. It's my dad, whatever. They see pictures on the wall or over, dude, look at dad's guns. Your dad's got some pipes on.
He still does.
I'd be like,
he does.
Okay, it's my dad. I wasn't putting that together. But then as I got older and I saw my friends' parents were getting older, even to this day, my people come over to my parents' house, or we'll go over there and they're like, dude, your dad, he's 83 years old. He's still killing it. Like, he's always moving slower, and, everything kind of slows down, which we're talking about. But the muscle mass that he had has kept him going and put him in a position put him in a position to be way probably more resilient than the average cat that doesn't lift weights. So I'm really making that comparison now, because I think the people I know, and we know this through science, that live longer, that have longer longevity, are those that lift weights, and they lift them often. So as we're getting, again, into this 40-year-old thing, 40 north of 40 thing, those that lift weights for the majority of their life tend to do much better north of 40, from a performance perspective, longevity perspective, health and wellness perspective, than those that don't. And I made the cardio comparison because we do talk a lot about cardiovascular fitness here. And I think that becomes more important as you get older, but not as a substitute for the strength training. For the strength training, yeah.
It's not one or the other.
That was a big thing for me. So why is this happening? Like, what's going on at 40-ish that wasn't happening when you were 25-ish or even 30-ish or whatever? I know for me, like, I'm a lot less active now than I was. Just period, end of story. Yeah. I just am. I don't have as much time, and we could say like, you're not being disciplined enough. No, I have to prioritize my day and my time in order to get this stuff in, versus before, like 3 hours at the gym was not a big deal. Where did I have to be? So the timing piece, I think, is much different there. And that definitely contributes to, how much activity you're actually able to get done. So it makes the activity that you choose to get done think really important, which is part of the reason I want to have this conversation.
Well, I think it's important what you just said too is, when they just did a study recently where if you're sitting 5, 6, 7 hours a day, that just 1 hour at the gym isn't reversing anything.
Kind of negates.
Right? It doesn't do shit. So it's like, constantly moving more and getting up more. And like you're talking about the building of muscle, all these guys that are lifting weights after 40, they look more resilient, right? Well, they have better bone density, right? All of these things that we're not thinking about when we're lifting, right? We're like, oh, I want big shoulders. But this lifting is literally helping you go into being more resilient within, there's Barbara that came in with, all these issues with the bones, right?
Oh, yeah. She was osteoporotic in her hips
and
osteopenia, I think, in one side.
She went to the doctor, reversed.
Yep.
She came here and worked her
she was
ass off.
Diligent.
She had frozen shoulder when she showed up too, by the way.
Worked her ass off and reverse these things where
this is north of 75 years old.
Exactly.
North of 70.
So she's trying to reverse something, whereas most, the people that we're talking about that you look in the gym, they've been lifting, they don't have to get to that point and be like, oh, I need to accelerate. You're already there. So
this is such an important factor. You brought up the mobility thing, and the quality of your tissue is much different.
Yes.
So trying to maintain that, is much different than trying to gain it at a certain point at life where you never had this to begin with, or you did when you were very, very young unknowingly, and you're trying to get it back. That's not going to happen.
You've been sitting like that for 40 years.
There are things that you can get better, but to get back to optimal, or that's not, I don't like that word, but getting back to like awesome, like you may have been in your 20s.
You might never bench press again, but you might use dumbbells, or you might slightly incline the bench. You might do a variance of this exercise. It doesn't have to be all of these things based on you for your body or what's going on. We can always manipulate these exercises to get a good result, right?
Yes. At the same time, you have to put your ego aside.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. There's that too. There's mindset, which we can talk about. Just staying on the tissue quality thing. If you haven't been doing this type of exercise for a long, long time, it's obviously much different. It's much harder to gain that tissue quality. And it's also going to be probably a longer road, more uncomfortable road for you to go through. You're going to have to be, if you're thinking back to like the kind of shape I was in at 25, let's say you worked out really hard between 25 and 30, where life changes. You go 10 years from 30 to 40 without doing much, right? Which is twice as long as you spent working out, and you're sitting behind that desk and you're having kids, or and you're dealing with the things in life, with work and all that other stuff. You've just doubled the time doing, I don't want to say nothing, but very little, sitting and doing all the things that you're going to now have to undo. Going back to where you were at 25 and thinking it's going to feel the same and will look the same and work the same is, to me, it's a ridiculous thought process. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing the same types of things, but to your point, Jeff, you're going to probably have to modify some things. You're going to have to get, you're going to have to get really real, really quick with what the situation is, and then understand it may take you twice as long in order to get back to the same kind of condition you were in, for those 5 years, because you just sat for 10 years, to think that you're going to be in the same kind of shape and do the same kind of things that's not rooted in a lot of logic. Yeah. I was just talking about being generally less active. That's that time period, when things change for people, that, you start to take on more responsibility, your career is going, whatever. I see a lot of guys right now, and this is just people that I interact with on a regular basis, outside of working the show, and that is guys that have been through the military and spent a good amount of time there, where they entered in at a very young age, either late teens, early 20s. They were forced to be in some kind of condition, and oftentimes they spent a lot of time making sure they were in the right kind of condition to enter in and come out the other side in a good position. Many of them went into very, very strenuous selection processes, knowing that fitness is absolutely key. And then they went into these jobs where their fitness was 100% a survival thing. Like, if you're not fit, you could die. Worse than that, in their minds, in a lot of these guys' minds, if you talk to them, it's like, worse than me dying is not being able to do what I need to do for my buddy standing next to me. And so that is obviously a different driver. And, those jobs are train 6 hours a day, 7 hours. They show up at 6 a.m., leave at 6 p.m., and you're training, and they're doing, 2 workouts a day, right? Where they're getting their runs in, or their Q course things, or their PT course things, and they're lifting weights. And if we go back, say 15 years, or even as many as 20 years now, things got a lot smarter in the military about how they were training themselves. And the ability to get that information was much easier. And I'd say it was higher quality. And so you saw people getting on these workout programs to build muscle, maintain muscle. For a long time, these guys would just get huge, right? Yeah. Get huge. But, I don't want to generalize. So people that are out there, I'm not served, so I'm not trying to speak out of turn here. I'm just talking about what people have told me and what I've seen. And so they're training very hard with the weights and the cardio too, because they recognize, they have to be ready at any moment. So they have this time in their life where they're really lifting hard, they're really running hard, and they come out the other side, and then there's not really a reason, right, to do that outside of, I want to be prepared for life, and I don't want to get fat and old and whatever, but you don't have the same drivers. It's not on the same schedule. As disciplined as you might be, you don't have the push from whether it's the job or the guy standing next to you or whatever else, and they're kind of reaching.
Everything's changed, right? You don't have the same habits.
Demands have changed.
So now if you don't plug that in now to your new, there's no colonel here telling me I need to do A, B, and C. Right. It's like you might be in limbo for a bit.
Yeah, and usually what's happened along that time is, like, again, in a 20-year war, you've seen these guys go off the war and come out, and things happen, man. I mean, they're carrying heavy loads, and they're getting all kinds of things. They're being blown up, they're being shot up, but their bodies are wrecked. And they know that, and they realize this, and they've been fighting against that for a very long time. Then they get out, going back to what you were saying, it's like, fuck, I'm tired. God, that knee really hurts. Or those 2 herniated discs in my back and the 3 in my neck, like, those have really caught up with me now. And, like, I am less active now. And so there's this kind of jumping back in and reaching. So again, whether you want to admit it or not, you are not the same guy you were. You are not the same person you were in your 20s that you are in your 40s. You're 100% not. So you have to really take stock of that. And I think it's really tough for them, particularly in the other maybe comparison where it would be like the athletes, the previous athlete.
Oh, yeah.
They always want to push. Like, they'll hire a coach, right? Like, or they'll go join the gym where they know it's a competition all the time, so they can get back in the shape, because they're still really attached, and they can still really remember what it was like to be in their peak physical condition at that given time doing that particular thing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, as far as those 2 groups that you were mentioning, though, the other thing is they had the programming for them. They were told what to do. And then when you no longer have that structure, yet you still want to have that strength or be able to go through those types of workouts. I mean, that wasn't their job to create a program for themselves. So then they're kind of left with, well, what do I do and how do I go about it?
Yeah.
Some just keep doing the same thing that they were.
And they don't need to do that, right?
No, and it's just, this is what I was doing then, and it's workout, and it's just kind of in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's this reaching back, like, so when they're realizing, man, I am getting out of shape. I can't run the 10 miles I used to be able to run anymore. And, I can't pull my body weight up 25 times or whatever. And I'm a weak piece of shit, or whatever. That starts to creep into the head. And in that case, these are people that are very tough people, right? Mentally, a lot of mental and intestinal fortitude. And they're like, fuck, then I got to work hard, and I'm just going to suffer. And that leads down to another path. And people are out there. I put this post up the other day about, like, listening to that voice in your head and the signals that there's a voice, and then there's signals that your body is sending you
completely different,
loud and clear. And you need to understand what that voice is. Is it the inner bitch, or is it, your body telling you, hey, listen, man, like, you're going a little hard right now, and if you don't maybe dial it back or adjust this over here, there's going to be problems. And we, again, that type of person usually reaches to the, I'm going to silence that inner bitch by going harder. And because that worked. That worked before. Yep. It got them through before, and there may not have been a choice, right?
Exactly.
Like, if you don't go, then you get disqualified, or, again, not to make this morbid or go to the other extreme, like, you die, right? Or and anything in between. So it is different. I think there's a little bit of something to talk about there in terms of mindset and listening to those things, but you're much different now. Like things are different. You don't have to train like that anymore. You don't have to do those same workouts. And by the way, you've accumulated things, stress over time, not just physical stress, mental, emotional stress. You've got financial stress. You've got your kids, your relationship stress. You've got all those things those are weighing. They all matter.
Mm-hmm.
They all matter now. Not that the stuff before didn't matter, but they matter as much as they ever did right now.
Well, so I think a huge thing I'm seeing right now is, and with the group that you're talking about, everyone's coming back to mobility and proper movement patterns, and then loading properly through good strength patterns, right? Squat, hinge, carry, overhead press, stuff like that. They're coming back to the basics and just kind of understanding, okay, I don't move that well anymore. The tissue quality, like you're seeing Vernon Griffin and the GBRS guys, right? Like they're doing a really good job with the mobility piece of getting these guys to move again in a more functional pattern for their body. And then they're lifting strength, right? And they're working on mobility, where I think for people that are in this, that want to come back to it, look at it's okay where you're at. Obviously, we have to be okay with that. But if you were a bad motherfucker before, nothing changes. Just because you have to go sit on the ground and do a 90-90 and do a frogger to warm your hips up.
Man.
Like, dude, that doesn't make you a bitch. It makes you actually a smart person.
Smarter.
So now you're going to come back and you're going to bring that body back, maybe better, right?
Yeah, and you have
the whole principle of working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, and you should have the time now in order to put that in, right? And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But before it was like, look, we have to train. We got this. We got to be at. We get an hour in the weight room. We're gonna hammer, and you just go for that hour and a half, whatever else. And then you move on to the next thing. Now maybe you can put a little bit more time into, the warm up, the mobility, the cooling down.
Understanding you're not going to recover as well as you did when you were younger, right? You could throw anything at you as younger, you just bounce back, right?
Yeah, I think going back to the recovery thing, and again, just stepping outside, it doesn't matter if you're in this particular special population that we're talking about or not. Some of the other things that, I take into account are when I was younger, I ate a lot more. From a recovery perspective, I ate a shit ton.
My appetite was...
I couldn't get enough. I mean, I was telling somebody was asking me the other day about the whole bodybuilding. Did you ever do bodybuilding? You ever compete? And I'm like, yes, I did. I gave it a try.
Where's those pictures?
I think I remember seeing a picture
Where's those pictures?
Him in his little bikinis.
I gave it a try. It was, let's just say I did my best for two occasions, and I figured out really fast that I was not going to be able to be very competitive there.
Did your teardrop pop?
For a few reasons.
I'm afraid to ask what that is.
It's a VMO.
Oh, okay. It is the T. Okay. I wasn't sure if there was another reference.
He's like, okay.
So, we were talking about that, and it was like, they asked me, like, how tough is that or whatever. I'm like, look, man, I had a very little experience with it, but I've been around the thing a little while. The tougher thing that I think people don't really take into account when they look at, if you're from the outside looking in and you're going, oh, those guys must work out all the time. It's not the working out, it's the eating.
Dude, that's a whole job.
Yeah, and I remember trying to get, like, understanding, like, the first show going, at my height, my size, I need to be significantly heavier in order to be even a little bit competitive here. Doesn't matter how shredded I could get or whatever, which wasn't very.
I'm just doing the math. That's a lot of calories.
It's a lot. It was like 6,000 calories a day. That's a lot of calories. And you can imagine what that did to my intestinal tract and how much stress that was, and all the drinks and concoctions I was trying to put down. But it was the eating part, right? And so I ate a lot, and I learned how to eat like a bodybuilder early. My dad taught me that. I've told the story before where I used to do like
pot roast,
the ice cream. No, it was like ice cream in the blender before school every day. And late in junior high and even into high school, it was 2 scoops of ice cream, whole milk, 2 to 3 scoops of Joe Weider's protein powder, malted milk, like a scoop of like vitamin powder. It was, and I would be guzzling that stuff down. So I learned early, like, you got to eat big to get big was the thing, right? My point is like I ate a lot more then. And so, and I think most people do, it's available. They have the time or whatever. Some people don't. But specifically when males start working out, they're like, oh, now I'm going to start working out, right? And what's the first thing they do? They go to the supplement store and they start to buy supplements. And oftentimes there's like, I got to have protein. Yeah. So they buy their protein.
What powder are you on, bro?
So automatically they're adding more calories to what they were already doing. And they're adding more protein to what they were already doing, which can yield a very good result, particularly at a time in your life when your hormones might be a little bit more peaked from a testosterone perspective, even HGH perspective, things are a little bit more balanced before you fucked them all up with all the other things that you do. And, just age starts to happen and your body starts to slow its process down a little bit. I ate a lot more. And as I got older, I started to eat less. And interestingly, what happens is as we're eating less and your body's starting to metabolically adapt, you start to put on more body fat, right? And so if you went hard at one point and you didn't realize how much you were eating then, and that we're often eating less now, we don't eat as much as we used to. We're not probably putting down as much protein as we used to, and so that takes away from the recovery process, that you might be, trying to go through. And again, we talked about metabolic adaptation. If you're not taking into account that you may be eating way under where your baseline should be in order to perform and simply recover, not even put on muscle and, increase performance, but just kind of maintain. That's a big issue. And I think it's often overlooked by, as we get older, we think we should be eating less because we're carrying more body fat than we should be eating, than we should be carrying. And so we don't eat enough.
Yeah. And we need more protein as we get older as well.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's interesting. I was having this conversation. We were sitting around a lunch table one time and this guy was talking about it's proven that, as you get older, we need less protein. We don't process it the same. And he was even trying to give me some grams and whatever. Yeah.
We need less.
You were there.
We have sarcopenia that sets in.
So I listened to him kind of talk through it, and it wasn't well-founded. The conversation wasn't well-founded. I decided not to engage.
Pursue it, yeah.
Yeah, it was a table full of people. I'm like, I'm not working today. I'm not doing this.
You're like, I'm going to eat some chicken breast over here. And just
Yeah, but that isn't true.
No.
So what happens is as our muscle mass goes down over time, obviously what you're looking at is like maybe a study that's showing, we don't need as much protein as we needed when we were younger. Yeah, but because your muscle mass is lower now than it was when you were younger, oftentimes, because we had less. We've already said these things, less activity. We don't eat as much. Things have happened. That doesn't have to happen. That's by a series of events. You ate less, you became less active, you didn't lift weights anymore, whatever else. So theoretically, yes, your protein need would come down in terms of sustaining the amount of muscle mass that you have. But is that the way it ought to be? No, if you're continuing to lift weights and you're continuing to stimulate the body in the way that it needs to be stimulated in order to maintain hormonal balance and maintain lean tissue, maintain bone density and all those things, that number doesn't go backwards. And your body, in your digestive tract, your body wouldn't necessarily adjust to having less protein in it. It would maintain that, but we just don't train the body that way. But we do go through these stages where we're doing a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit more, a little bit less. The bigger gap you take, the harder it's going to be return to, that place that you were, and to expect that you're going to get back to where you were at 25 when you're at 45. Yeah, that might be a little bit of a stretch.
There's one thing I really want to cover, and because people will be like, well, why is resistance training so important? Outside of we're talking about bone density, but just so people understand, like on a scientific level, like you have an anabolic and a catabolic response. One is building and one is breaking down. When you lift weights, you are hitting an anabolic signal. So you're building your hormones, you're building new tissue, your hair, all of these things are going to be better. Whereas when we talk about catabolic, and this would be like a long distance runner, that is just breaking down. There's no build back from that point. So just understanding that you can kind of get a youthful regenerative response from just resistance training itself. It's rejuvenative. That's why you should be doing this as you get older. Right, to maintain longevity and all of these things, as we talk about testosterone drops. Well, we can resistance train to help lift it back up.
Yeah. So the key there being, like, if you're going to choose a fitness program, choose one that's rooted in a very solid resistance training component.
Exactly.
And be careful about what you're doing when we talk about becoming fit. That is relative, right? Like, how are we defining fitness? And I think this is, again, people reach back. Like, what was fitness for me? And again, those athletes or those people, previous military service or even law enforcement or, whatever. But I want to stick to the person that was really active and felt good, looked good naked, at one point. And they keep reaching back to that. They're defining it as, well, my bench press was this. My squat was this. my mile time was this, my deadlift was that, whatever the case
I had
is.
$1 for every time.
That is not fitness. Like you're putting a number on a very, very large concept, right? Like what should you be concerned about? Well, we just kind of hit, broadly, muscle density, muscle mass, bone density, anabolic signaling are probably the most important things you can be thinking about as you age, right? How do I keep sharp? How do I keep this tissue moving? How do I keep my anabolic hormones elevated at the highest level I can keep them elevated at, naturally without having to do exogenous hormones or anything, supplements, whatever else. And we do that through weightlifting. And for a lot of years, we heard like cardiovascular fitness is the most important thing. And we know like, hey, listen, heart attack and heart disease are two of the number one killers in the United States. So, people are putting together, well, I got to do I got to have a stronger heart. What you don't understand also in some of those benefits you get from the resistance training is you get increased blood volume, increased vascularity, right? These are things that carry things to and from.
I don't know if you've ever deadlifted before, but I'm winded after that.
Yes.
Like if you're lifting weights properly and like you're
and it signals, but what I was just going to go back to what you're saying. It's signaling that anabolic response versus being winded on a 5-mile run.
And it's still going to help with cardiovascular in a different way, more of a pressure system. But at the same time, like we're not saying like don't do cardio and just resistance train and that's going to help your cardio. It will help your heart, but it's not going to take place for like a long distance or steady state, getting your heart pumping for a longer period of time.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I think the balancing act is what people have a tough time with. And so again, talking about athletes or people that were once very fit and are looking back, they're going, what is the thing that I need to do to return to that level? And for a long time, we saw CrossFit as being the answer because what you were watching happen is people getting seemingly very fit, very fast. And, they were starting to lose a lot of body fat and you could see that muscularity was changing. They look good naked a lot of the time, whatever. And that's what we all want, right? At the end of the day, that's kind of what we want. The challenge with that is all the things that you hear on the other end. It's like, okay, well, if you're working at your 80% all the time, what are the downstream effects of that? And, that could be injury, it could be sickness, it could be joint issues, it could be hormonal downregulation, which
especially for women
leads to other things. And it happens over a longer period of time. I am not bad-mouthing CrossFit at all.
I think it's great that it allowed women to start lifting heavy weights.
But 100%. I mean, I owe a good amount of my success as a gym owner to CrossFit and them getting people fired up and excited about it and also exposing people to a lot of the modalities that they had never been exposed to before, now is almost normalized. Think about kettlebells, the barbell, right? Pull-ups, back up on the gymnastics type movements, all that kind of stuff. So sleds, I mean, those basically made their way out of the strength and conditioning rooms and onto the floor of CrossFit or whatever. CrossFit studios everywhere, or CrossFit boxes everywhere, and people are introduced. So when they walk into a gym now, they recognize it. They're not afraid of it. They know it. They recognize benefits that are. So again, not taking anything away. The challenge is when a lot of these people were in the best shape of their life, they were doing that, right? Yeah. CrossFit's been around for 15, 20 years now, right?
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yep, 20 years. And so to think that you're at 45, you're going to do what you were doing at 25, from a CrossFit perspective, that's a little, unless you've been managing your programming, managing your mobility, managing your nutrition, your body fat levels, all those things over a longer period of time, jumping back into that is not a really great idea. No. You need to reestablish tissue quality. You need to reestablish mobility, all of those things. And that's where I think people reach back to. They're like, I got to go back to CrossFit. I got to go back to CrossFit, or I got to go back to something like that. Again, that we talked about that special population earlier. Like these guys want to do the WODs.
And it's like the games, every workout is the game, whereas the guys that do the games do not train like that all the time. As they get up to the event, yes, they start training like that. But when you see them in the off season, they're building strength. They're working on their mobility.
The ones that have longevity in the sport.
The ones that are actually in this. Yeah, exactly.
Because there's a lot of people that were very short lived, right?
Oh, for sure.
Things caught up with them. But that's athletics in general. That's competition. That's sport. But again, reaching back to thinking that you need to be doing something like that where you're doing it all the time at one time, I think is a trap.
Yep.
So when we look at it, going back to the resistance training, get yourself into a program where you're resistance training 3, maybe 4 days a week, and you're balancing that against some type of metabolic conditioning, and maybe even some lower intensity cardiovascular work.
Yep.
People are like, well, what does that mean? Well, like, first off, the metabolic conditioning piece, I get it. Like, people want to get their heart rate up and they want to get that motor running and feel like,
Feels good.
yeah, like I like that.
Feels
Like,
good,
I like
yeah.
being pushed. That should be a very small percentage of the whole when you're looking at metabolic or your cardiovascular conditioning, in my opinion. You can get a lot of benefit from that. If your goal is to maintain longevity, muscle mass, and your health and wellness over time, it should be a much smaller percentage than the larger percentage, which is the resistance training, and maybe even the time put in with regard to the long, slow distance training, or that just above threshold, we'll call it like just above zone 2,
Exactly,
zone 1,
yeah.
zone 2 type of cardiovascular training, which for some people may just be a walk, right? For some people, they need to walk with a weight vest. They need a little bit more to kind of maybe get that thing up, and it's a little bit more of a brisk walk, or you go out and you do some rolling hills or whatever. But it's not beating yourself up. It's not pushing to the 80% that you would see like in the WOD, right? For some people, it might be getting on a bike, spinning their legs. For some people, it might be just getting on if you enjoy things like the treadmill or the Stairmaster, elliptical trainer, or whatever else. I think they all have their place, but maybe it's just getting on those and just getting that heart rate up above threshold. That should be, I think would be, for me, is like 2/3 of what your cardiovascular routine might look like against your 1/3 higher intensity, interval training, things like that. If you're just trying to maintain, obviously, if you have a very specific goal, then the programming could change dramatically. But if you balance that against your 3 to 4 days of resistance training, developed program, you're putting yourself in a really good position to have plenty of time to get the things that you need to get done, and have plenty of space within the blocks of time that you're spending to really focus on the things that may or may not be important to you. And again, if that's aesthetics and you want bigger shoulders or better glutes or whatever, there's so much time, right, in those 4 blocks, 3 to 4 blocks a week, for you to really focus on that, to change things aesthetically if you want to. And I've never met anybody, like I've said before, that doesn't want to do that. So, I mean, if you're looking at your workout program, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but if you're looking at your workout program, and again, a person that's maybe more of a high achiever, and again, if I look back to when I was 25 and I was looking around the gym at those 45-year-olds or whatever, they may have trained more like bodybuilders. I'll be honest, they may have trained more like bodybuilders, more of the body part split thing back then, but they all did some cardio. And it was an elliptical. They were really popular back then. It was an elliptical trainer, or it was a stationary bike, and it looked lazy.
Oh yeah.
It looked lazy. And whether they knew what they were doing or not, it was that long, slow distance stuff. They were doing 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour of quote unquote cardio, which was just getting on, that machine and being lazy. I want to add this too. So I worked in the gym business for a lot of years, and this might hit home for people, and this will hit home for the 40-somethings, I think, and for the 20-somethings that are like, dude, you're a bunch of fucking old people. Like, this is not my problem, whatever. Okay, but you're gonna be that someday.
Don't worry.
I want to be very real about this. In my career, my 10-year career in the big box gyms, I was part of. I didn't see them actually happen. One time I did, so it was one of 4. Four people die in the gym.
Wow.
One of those people was on a treadmill. The other 3 people were in spin classes.
Oh.
They were all males, all of them. They were all mid to late 40s. I think the one guy was just north of 50. All of them, we used to see 5 or 6 days a week in the gym religiously. These were the type of people that would be at the door at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever, waiting. And if that door was not open at 6 a.m., they're losing their minds outside. They were very, very disciplined about their fitness, maybe neurotic at some level. None of them lifted weights as often as they were in these cardiovascular classes or on the cardiovascular type equipment.
Interesting.
I remember this vividly. The one guy that was like probably a little closer to 50, I remember like this dude was just, when you looked at him, like shirt off in the locker room or whatever, it's like, dude, if I look half as good as this guy when I'm 50, like I'm going to be super happy. Like, that's what I want to look like. My point of this is not that the cardio killed him, but they were putting all this emphasis in the cardiovascular exercise, and they weren't spending time on the floor. And that really stuck with me. This happened in my late 20s and in my early 30s when I witnessed these things happen, when I was sort of part of it in the gyms. And that really stuck with me. I was like, God, these people look really fit. And keep in mind, like in my early 30s, I was really doing a lot of cardiovascular fitness. My weight training had really been cut back because I was doing the multi-sport stuff, the triathlon stuff, and adventure racing stuff. That really stuck with me. And at the same time, my entire career at that point, from a science perspective and what was being pushed from like the medical community, was cardio. Yep. And it's now shifted. And I don't think we can ever emphasize that enough, that, you know, that weight training piece is so important. And cardio is important, but how you apply it and the percentage of each is super important. I may be beating this up, but I don't think I've ever shared that story before. I don't even know if you guys knew that or not, but that was like, it struck me then. And I don't ever talk about it because I don't know, I guess I kind of forgot about it. But, you know, I'm that age now. You know, I'm looking at that now. And I think that's something that people should be taking consideration of, particularly, you know, dads, guys out there. You know, what are you doing to balance your program? Okay, you might look good or feel good with your shirt off, but what are you doing to manage your health, you know, after, you know, north of 40 now, as well as your fitness? And, you know, is it always a competition for you, or are you doing the things you need to do? And have you, you know, maybe gone and done some blood work? Have you gone and seen your physician for a checkup? You know, what is your blood pressure? Are we managing things right now the way they need to be managed? Or are you still trying to train like you were training when you were, you know, 25, 30 years old? Because, you know, you look good and you look better than all the other dads. I think that's a thing that I think a lot of guys particularly struggle with over 40.
You know, I'm listening to everything that's being said, and we can save this for another time. But the other thing that's really striking me, you know, you're talking about being 40 and making sure that you're getting your resistance training in, and, you know, getting a little bit of cardio. But the other thing is the freaking nutrition.
Yep.
Because that's something that you can work on 24/7,
yep,
regardless of whether or not you have access to a gym or not.
Yeah, this is where things get, you know, really wild. And I don't mean wild. I guess what I mean is like, it gets very hard for people to wrap their heads around what they need to do. I'm just going to take it back to the basics about eating more. You know, like if you're doing more, you need to generally eat more. And as you get older, how you do that becomes very important, no matter how you want to slice that up. Yep. Like your body's ability to metabolize and deal with proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, it will change based on, you know, hormone levels, based on the activities levels or non-activity level that you're doing. A lot of things happen. I mean, it's like 1 in 5 people are now on at least 2 medications, you know, out there. How those things impact these things, you know, depending on where you are, you know, down the line of your health and fitness, there's those things to be taken into consideration. So much confusion lies around.
I know it's another topic for another time. I know, because we wanted to talk about the fitness component, but I mean, I'm just sitting here listening and taking this all in, and I'm thinking, you know, if somebody's coming up with excuses as far as like, oh, well, you know, I don't know where I'm going to find the time to go work out, or, you know, I need to designate 3 or 4 days to resistance training and da-da-da-da-da. Focus on your nutrition then.
Yeah, I think you got to...
Because I think that's just as important. And then to maximize the results in the gym, if you are putting the time in the gym, then you also have to pair it with your nutrition.
Yeah, I think part of this is like somebody going back again when they were younger and may have been semi-active or very active and felt like they were in good shape, and, you know, that, you know, aesthetically they felt really good about themselves. They probably didn't have to think very hard about it.
Ate whatever they want, probably.
Or they were able to focus really heavy on the exercise piece, and that ended up yielding them the result that they needed, because they were in a position to really reap the benefits of the rewards of that, you know, whatever time they were in their life. Maybe they got a little lucky. Maybe there was a little bit more organization and smarts that went into it, but they don't know what to reach back to on that. So they go specific to the exercise, and the nutrition piece is, they know they're a little bit more mature. They're a little bit more savvy now. Yeah, I should probably have few less glasses of wine per week. And
everyone you talk to has something that they know that they're conscious of.
Right.
They're like, everybody.
But they haven't really broken it down. Yeah. And so,
or in like one of the examples you used the other day, talking to somebody like, oh, I'm getting serious about it. I'm going to cut my calories down to 1,800.
Yeah. I would be lying if that conversation didn't help prompt this conversation. I was like, dude, this is a dude, very high achiever, very A-type guy, served in the military at the highest level, did some really crazy stuff, and, has been, working really hard since he got out, and now he's like, I'm not in the kind of shape I want to be in anymore.
And how old is he?
Yeah, and he's just turned 40. And he hit me, he's like all excited. He's like sending me, and this is the conversation for another time, but he wanted to know, like, hey, where do I go besides here to get my supplements? And I was like, well, I have a lot of things to say about that, man, but, hang tight, I'll send you an email or whatever. And then, it's just been like, hey, here's the workout I did today. I'm like, dude, it's awesome. You're on it. You seem really committed. Even got his wife on board, right? He's doing it, whatever. And or I think they're doing it together. It's not to say he pulled her on. She may have been more of the influence than he was. I don't know. The point of it is like, they're really making a commitment and they're getting it done and whatever, nutrition, all that stuff. And he sends me how many calories he's eaten. And I go, Jesus Christ. I go, Cece eats more calories than this guy. I go, are you sure, man? Like, I go, I promise I'm not going to try to change your mind here. But he's like, look, I am trying to lose this amount of weight and this amount of time. And this is a smart guy. He actually has a background in this at some level. So, not to take anything away, I'm like, okay, man, but that's less protein than Cece eats on a daily basis, right? That's less calories than that's less than half of probably what your total daily need is, or right around half. Yeah. I go, you're going to lose some weight, that is for sure, but I'm worried about the downstream effects. Now, he'll do it. This dude will do it. He will suffer and he will do it and he'll lose weight. At 25, doing that versus doing that at 40, it's going to have different impacts on your body. And we already talked about this, resiliency, recovery, all that stuff is now much different than it was. The downstream effects of under eating, being underfed, under-recovered, and maybe even overreaching your workouts a little bit because you're feeling motivated and whatever else. Now versus then, much, much different as you start to age.
Especially that you've cut now calories back too.
Yeah, I mean, those are the things people reach for because they're looking to get that result a little bit faster. And again, there's more of a thought process going on. I mean, it's not doing anything wrong. It's like, hey, I know I need to track my calories. I know I need to find out what my TDE is. I know I need to do this. I know I should be targeting some supplementation a little bit. I know, and by the way, the workouts have been very smart, right? But they're a little higher intensity. That it's all very well. Yeah. There's a very good thought process there, but it's like, why are we doing this so fast?
And so I'm glad that you said that, because other people that are thinking like, hey, I'm going to cut a bunch of calories and I'm going to lose all this weight.
Yeah.
Well, like we're talking about metabolic adaptation, and maybe we don't explain it that well, but I'm going to try right here. If let's say his maintenance is 3,000, right? The not to gain or lose weight. He eats 3,000 calories with his exercise. All of that said and done, doesn't lose or gain a pound. Now, all of a sudden, he's going to 1,800 calories, right? So he's in a huge deficit. All of a sudden, that body's metabolism, they're going to down-regulate to whatever he's eating. Let's call it 1,800 like he was, right? So now the body's running on an 1,800 scale, right? So when he comes back and eats more, let's say, oh, I'm done with this fucking diet and I'm just going to go and eat the 3,000 calories again. Now you're 1,200, over your maintenance, where you could do little cuts, 250, 500 calories, all the way down to whatever you want. And slowly.
As long as the meter is moving the direction you need it.
You're going to be losing weight. It doesn't need to be this fast because the body's going to halt. Yeah. It is going to stop and down-regulate. So just to think about, everything, move the needle nice and slow and give yourself some time.
Yeah, I think that is the patience piece, which is interesting. As we get older, we should have more patience. Yeah. That's in my mind, like I should be a little bit more patient now. But at the same time, that doesn't always equate.
Yeah, my whole question is, well, why? What's the hurry?
Yeah,
because you didn't get to where you currently are overnight. So what makes you think that you need to be in such a rush to get to where you want to be overnight?
Can't answer that. Didn't ask it, and that's up to each individual and kind of what they want to do. But that is something to think about. I'm going to go back to like when I was 25, looking at the 40-year-old. I was not thinking about being 40. No. I was just like, when I'm that old, I don't want to look like that.
Or I want to look like that.
Or I hope I look that
exactly.
good, right?
Yeah.
That's all it was. That was as deep as that thought process went. It was never, man, I don't want to hurt like I see that guy hurting, or I don't want to be as stiff and immobile as I see that guy, or I don't want to be as frail as this person is, right? It was like, this person looks a certain way and I don't want to look like that.
You never think that you'll get there either.
No. It's like, if I just keep doing this, like I hear this all the time. Like I get my gray hair doesn't sell very well to the younger crowd. I get it. I mean, I have kids. Like they're a fuck you, dad. Like it's like, what would you know? Kind of thing. So it's like, I get that. I totally understand it. And I laugh about it all the time now. But if you think a little differently, which is like, what are the things I need to do now, consistently now, so that I don't wind up in a situation where I'm even thinking like that when I get older. Also understanding that shit is going to happen, right? Things will come up. I think that builds in a mindset over time that, again, when you're looking back and like, okay, now I want to make a change, I recognize that I probably need to be a little bit more patient with this, or that I can be a little bit more patient with this in order for this to happen. Most folks, as they get older, as I was younger, I did have a coach for a little while, and then I became a coach. So I have a little bit maybe different perspective on this, but most younger folks are not hiring coaches. They're following some example from somebody, but they're not really hiring a coach. As people get older, they start to think about it, well, especially those athletes, like, no, I want to work with somebody that can get me back in shape as fast as I possibly can, kind of thing. And so there's this maybe a little bit higher level thought process, and recognizing that they don't have to be so independent in that process. So in terms of making your choices, I think that's wise. Don't just latch on or follow like the example because you follow the 40-year-old super fit mom or super fit dad or whatever, and think that that's what you should be doing right now. Think about, be smart about this. And I think taking into account, like, what's going to help me with my resiliency? What's going to help me with my return to play plan here? Because I've been out of the game for a while. What makes sense logically? Like, am I in a hurry? Like, what is my why? Because that will answer a lot of questions for you. As I got older and, think about programming and putting things together, during the lockdown period, when I was thinking about how are we going to help people right now, it was also about how are we going to help them in a year from now and 2 years from now when this shit goes away, which it has. People were trying to figure out, like, how are they going to get back into the game, or how do they maintain, during this time? And a lot of people did a really great job of figuring it out. Home gyms went berserk. People really got more independent. So good to see. Like, there was this huge, uptick of, I need to be doing things a little bit smarter and on my own. And I can do that on my own. They were like empowered to do it because they were forced to do it. But in my head, I was like, okay, how do we put together programs for people to come out the other side? The people that were active and the people that weren't active are now recognizing, shit, that was really scary. Like, I didn't see that come in. Like, I'm afraid because my condition, that is my level of health, my level of fitness, my mental health, my awareness and all that stuff is not where I now know it needs to be. I need to get restarted. How do we put together some programming to help people, in those different positions? And so, if you're one of those people that's trying to find your way back in and hasn't found the right thing, that is what RDF Strong is. I know, people looking at, it's not like the strength thing I'm really looking for, max strength. RDF Strong is not a max strength program. It is a strength program. It builds strength over time, not so that you can do a max squat.
Yeah, when you deadlift, max. You don't need to be pulling 400 pounds off the ground.
Again, so if you're 40 years old, like, do you need to do that anymore? Like, what is the point? Yeah. If your goal is to do that, then fuck it, do it. Yeah. Like, more power to you. But do you need to be doing that for your why? Yeah. Like, what is your why? Yeah. And if you're defining fitness as how much can I lift on my deadlift, okay, I can't argue with you. I'm just going to, what is the utility in that over time? I don't know. I don't really know. What's the risk to reward? I don't really know. That's not what strong is. Strong is putting those lifts are in there, but it's doing it in a way that allows your body time to recover while still building strength over time. And it does add a metabolic conditioning component to it. So we're not ignoring that as well. And we do that in a time frame. We look at it like 60 minutes, maybe 75 minutes if you're taking a little longer rest times or whatever. You can get it done in an hour, right? And then we give you some flexibility with we call it like choosing your own adventure. Like if you want to do some additional cardio, here's some suggestions and here's some workouts, whether you have equipment or not, to keep that heart rate up and work on that cardiovascular fitness that will support and not take away from what the plan is intended to do, which is build that strength and capacity over time. So that's what we were thinking. That's what we were thinking there. And I think, and going back to my conversations, and that's how we built. When I think about like the basis or like where our programs kind of stem from, it's from that type of programming. And we have Max and we have our online membership program and working on some other things that we'll put out there. But I was just connecting a guy the other day to our online membership program. This is part of that special population I was mentioning before. What he hit me with was like, hey, you got any extra workouts laying around? Like I've been kind of off track. And he says, what's really worked for me before is, like the bench press, bicep curls, pull downs, whatever, basic bro split stuff. He goes, that's what's worked for me in the past. I really like that. I was like, okay, no problem. So I'm like, okay, what do I do for this guy? This is what he's asked me for. I'm going to give it to him. So got him hooked up with the online membership. The online membership has many different programs in it, and it has versions of Strong and Max. In there, we call it total body conditioning and fit for action. Those are the real differences between the two, the two names. And then we have a physique program, which everybody loves, right? Everybody loves the physique program. It's very familiar. It's very bro split-ish, but it's done in a little bit smarter way in terms of the splits or whatever. And so I sent him all this stuff and I was like, hey man, here's what it is. Get in there. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to say this and I'll shut up, because all you 40-ish operator dudes, you're all, trying to do different things. And this is what I hear almost all the time. You like doing physique. I get it. Right? You think you should be doing the Fit for Action program, or the longer program, the 4-month program would be our Max program. You think you should be doing that because that looks and feels very familiar. It's the sexy shit, right? To what you were doing when you were operating, right? It's the high speed stuff, right? You're getting more max strength and power stuff in there. What you should be doing is the total body conditioning program or the RDF Strong program. You should probably be doing that more often. And then at times you jump out of that into the Max program or the cardiovascular, the HIT program, if you're looking to maybe pull down a few pounds or really ramp up your fitness for an event or something like that you want to do. But it's really rooted in this basic 3 to 4 days a week. Let's get your strength training done. Let's make sure we're putting in some Metcon. Not every day, not 5 days a week. Let's get some longer, slower distance stuff in there. That can be a hike, a walk, a bike ride with the kids. Yeah. You can balance it out, whatever you want to do. Maybe it's a run. If that's what you enjoy doing, you can keep your heart rate down and, you like running or you like cycling. That's really where, kind of the basis for our programming. And again, it was coming from a guy and, a team that is north of 40 going, we see a lot of programming out there, and we see a lot of people that are really reaching back to other things. What makes sense, and what have we seen based on the clients that we work with? Most of our people are in their 30s and 40s. Look, we have, it's a little bit higher ticket item here, and so those people have that discretionary income to spend there, and so we've just seen kind of what works over time. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add to that, just in terms of before we sign off.
I will tell you that all of my clients are over the age of 40, and literally that is my specialty. It's what I like. I like to help bring people back to fitness, to, like we're talking about, I get this all the time. I used to bench press this. I used to bench press that. Well, guess what, Chuck? You can't do that anymore. Guess what? So we're going to start over here with the 20-pound dumbbells, and I'm going to teach you how to press again, stuff like this. But these people, they come and they're out of pain. Oh my, I used to have shoulder pain. I don't have shoulder pain anymore because we're teaching them how to properly warm up, how to move properly. That's where I get my big, the reward from what I do. It's easy to get someone to squat underneath the bar and make them fucking sore.
Yep.
That's boring.
Any monkey can do that.
To be honest, it's boring to me. But to actually help people out through what's going on in their head. Oh, I used to feel this way and now I feel this, and having them be okay with it. Explain to them why and how doing this is going to put them back into a better position to be where they want to be or where they feel they should be, right? Or maybe helping them change their the paradigm shift, right? Like, you shouldn't be there anymore because what's going on in your life, like we were talking about, right? So just actually helping people navigate that kind of awkward space as they haven't moved, I guess I would say, that's what I do.
Yeah, for me, like, this is the last thing I will say. And that is like, it's like I'm Scott 2.0 now. It might even be like 3.0, but like there was the 20s, the 30s, and now it's the 40s. So call it maybe 3.0. When I look at things now, I still look at them very, very similar to the way I did when I was like in my 20s. Like, and I look down the line and I look at the 60, 50-year-olds and the 60-year-olds and the 70-year-olds out there, and the 80-year-olds, like my old man, like I said, he was 83 now, and I look at that and I go, I'm still looking at it the same way. I just think about it differently. Like, where do I want to be when I'm 60? And is what I'm doing now, is that stacking up to this? Is this going to fulfill my goal of being as mobile as I can, as healthy as I can, as vibrant as I can, keeping me out of the doctor's office or the orthopedic surgeon's office or the chiropractor's office or the physical therapist's office as much as possible? Am I doing those right things now? It might not matter to you now because you just want to look good for the Mexican vacation that you're taking with the family. I get it. There's no reason why you can't have that and have a program that has this longevity to it as well, so that you're still doing the things that you want and need to do as you get older. Again, for me, it's not like I don't need to have a six-pack I don't need to have a six-pack fucking now. Like, it's not important to me.
Well, we've already said, just because you have a six-pack doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy.
It doesn't. No, it has no bearing on my health and fitness right now. It could be a product of my training program and my nutrition program. That doesn't matter to me now. I get it. It might matter to you, in which case you have to do some very specific things from a nutrition and fitness perspective in order to get there. But is that going to be important for you in fucking 10 years, 20 years? What will be important for me in 20 years is to see my kids doing what they need to be doing, and their kids or whatever, if they've got them, and just being able to enjoy, what I do have, rather than what I could be taking away from myself now, or I guess just misplacing in terms of energy, for that. And everybody here I know at the table can speak to that in their own way. We've done it before on the show. So again, north of 40, shit changes. Accept it. Yes. It's fine. Yep. Make some adjustments. There's some basic things you can do. We've talked about them, but think long-term and get yourself into a program that makes the most sense in order to sustain that long-term longevity, as well as performance fitness. And like I said, looking good as good as you can, naked for as long as you can, knowing that things are probably going to sag and look a little wrinkly over time.